this breaking news this morning. Let's start with Queensland. The border's going to be open now to all of New South Wales, as we just reported. Everyone from Greater Sydney. It's going to be good for tourism, but I guess there is some nervousness that it might not always stay that way.
Yeah, good morning, Pete. That's right. I think it is a positive news. It's a fillip. Obviously, we had those disappointing scenes of people with loved ones in Queensland trying to rush off and duck off really quickly before Christmas. So great that now those pathways have reopened, and it's obviously great for tourism and the economic boost. When it comes to risk management, state governments, borders, vaccines, Pete, I think the next sort of 6 to 12 months, it's just going to be steady as she goes. We just know state governments are not going to let this thing run rampant in the community. The economic cost of that is obviously crazy high. We're seeing that in the UK and the United States. So they're going to continue to be cautious. That will mean sort of those short-term impacts. They're just going to have to be moderated and supported as best by both federal and state governments. Yeah,
I mean, the premiers haven't changed course yet, so why would they change now?
Well, exactly, and I think we had. I mean, I know it was tragic, and we lost people in Victoria with that secondary outbreak last year. But it was a cautionary tale for Australia. I think that perhaps if we hadn't had that, we might have had some more lackadaisical premiers and chief health officers across the country. They basically teamed up together and did a reasonably good job in tough circumstances of supporting Victoria. I think we all did. We're all Victorians for that period of time, and I think it basically showed us the way forward. Now, that is tricky. We know from an economic perspective and for businesses, it's frustrating, but I think, it's cold comfort, but I suppose the argument for business people is that the flip side is, do you want it rampant in the community? Your parents and grandparents at threat, vulnerable in emergency departments. I mean, I've seen it pretty close in my circumstances, Pete. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone.
Do you reckon the federal government has changed its approach, has changed its language when it comes to that elimination strategy? It was critical of states doing that in its early stages, but now it's probably seen the polling that's come out. People, for the most part, are standing right behind their premiers. And the evidence of this is the fact that our government pulled that trigger on the New Zealand bubble on Monday, suspending travel for 72 hours after one case.
Yeah, Pete, and I think there's another announcement expected today with those couple of cases in New Zealand. That's right. So, look, I mean, the public line is from the senior health advice right up to the Prime Minister is that they're continuing to look at prevention and suppression, not elimination. So we take them at their word. But, probably with the exception of New South Wales, it's a high level of caution across the country from the premiers and the chief health officers. They are extremely keen to get on top of any case, any hotspot, with the contact tracing and those preventative measures, including restrictions in some cases too. So, look, I think that they're definitely not. I think no premier is keen to sort of let happen or let get out of control what we saw in Victoria last year. There's just no way they're going to do that, particularly when they know they've got tools open to them to stop that happening. So if that ends up being, I suppose, something close to elimination, putting aside quarantine for the foreseeable future, it served us pretty well, and we're right up there when it comes to the rankings and how our governments are handling COVID.
OK, what do you make of Albo's potential reshuffle taking place reportedly this weekend? Butler out, Bowen in when it comes to energy and climate change.
Yeah, Pete, look, there's no greater, I suppose, power or tool for an opposition leader or for a leader of a party than being able to put, your key personnel in the positions that you think best suit them and best suit the party. And, it sounds like, based on the reports, we're looking at quite a significant reshuffle and perhaps more, more broad than what we thought maybe a month ago. And I think it makes sense, oppositions during pandemic have struggled to cut through, and that's not a reflection on Anthony. It's a reflection on the circumstances here and around the world. And I think, we're expecting an election in the second half of next year. You want to make sure you take the time to put your best performers in the best portfolios. And Pete, before you went to the US, you and I spoke a number of times about climate change and Mark. Mark's a great performer, and if the reports are true, him going to a broad and health and ageing portfolio, I think, is just reward for him doing a difficult job really well for a few terms. And climate change and energy, we'll get a fresh set of eyes in Chris Bowen, who's pretty good with the top end of town and the banks and the energy companies. He's been around before and gets issues management, so we'll be able to walk that balance really well. And, like the climate change, the global winds of climate change are now seemingly turning the other way with the Biden administration. And there's some pressure now on the Morrison government when it comes to net zero and 2050. So those will be the circumstances now that potentially a new shadow minister will inherit and the leader. So let's see how as he puts his stamp on things over the next few days.
Okay, a bit more of the decks that are shuffling, so to speak, at the moment. Penny Wong may well be moving. Richard Marles may well be moving as well to more domestic portfolios. What do you make of that?
Yeah, look, traditionally the deputy leader of the party gets an opportunity to choose their portfolio, and we've seen with Richard and then and Tanya previously starting off with a sort of foreign or national security portfolio and then moving to a frontline portfolio. Look, to be frank, I think it makes sense. I mean, it means that they can get sort of in the cut and thrust and in more of the centre of the policy action and debate, and that's a real useful thing in Phillip for a leader. And he's been a great Praetorian Guard and supporter of Anthony Albanese, so I think that Richard will do well in whatever portfolio ends up getting. And look, the similar thing with Penny as leader of the opposition in the Senate. She's been, consistently one of Labor's better performers for 20 years now. Sad to say, but her being in a frontline portfolio too, she gets it. She's been in climate change and finance, like Mr. Bowen has had some difficult portfolios. She'll do really well, and again, it just makes sense from the leader's perspective to have your best performers in the best positions, particularly in an election year.
Do you think Albo's going to make it to the election?
Well, I think this is a sign that he's putting, he's basically putting forward his best step in in the election year. So we'll sort of see how we go over the next 6 to 12 months. I think he's admitted in some of these interviews with Sky and ABC in the last few days, Pete.
Yeah.
Difficult operating environment, and he's resisted the cheap populist route when it comes to COVID and the opposition for opposition's sake. And perhaps that's had a slight cost for him. But to be frank, what people are going to be looking for at the next election day is who's going to take them forward, who's going to best manage the recovery and deal with these issues. And Anthony Albanese, as the leader of the Labor Party, will be able to put his hand on his heart and say, I will govern from the national interest, just like I did from opposition in holding the government to account. So,
okay.
Look, I think things are sort of starting to align really well. Some of those global wins are sort of starting to turn the other way, Pete. So, these elections always end up being very competitive, and I'm expecting the same one at the second half of this year.
Okay. James Cullen, good to see you. Talk to you again soon.
Cheers, Pete.